The second tell is seen more in experienced players, but it's just as common and just as helpful. The tell is that on the river, when some players have a weak hand and are at first to act, they'll check, and if they don't want you to bet, they'll pick up enough chips to call and kind of hold them in their hand menacingly. Like they'll say, "I check," with chips in their hands. What they're saying to you is, "Don't bet, I'm going to call." Well, what they want is you not to bet because they have a bad hand. What it means is that they're going to call and they have a weak hand. That's valuable information to have. Naturally, if you see that tell, you should make two adjustments. One, don't bluff. They're going to call. They got a weak hand, but it can beat a bluff. That's the whole point. So don't bluff. Second, you should value bet your weak hands. Stronger ones than the ones they might have, but still weaker than the ones that you would normally value bet with. Here's one example. Say you're on a flush draw with the jack of spades, nine of spades. The flop comes king of hearts, 10 of spades, 4 of spades. So in addition to your 4 flush, you have a gut shot. Your opponent checks, you bet, he calls. The turn is the 7 of hearts, so you miss. He checks, you again bet as a semi-bluff, and he calls. Now on the river, he checks with his chips in his hand menacingly, so he's giving you the tell. If you miss on the river, like say if it's the 10 of hearts, don't bet. You know your opponent's going to call, that's what the tell says, so there's no reason to bluff. Notice that this is a situation that you would normally bluff in. You missed, and there's a good chance that a player without a tell might fold. But once he's holding his chips in his hand, he's not going to fold, and you certainly shouldn't bet. If, on the other hand, you make a pair on the river, say with the jack of hearts or the 9 of hearts, then you should bet for value. He's got a weak hand. That's the second part of what his chip says. He says, "I'm checking, but I'm going to call if you bet, and I'm not going to like it." So if you've got a pretty good pair, like a pair of jacks or nines, you could be pretty sure it's good. He might have a 10, but he probably has a smaller pair, like a small pocket pair or a 4. Your pair of jacks, or your pair of nines, either one, are probably good, and you should value bet them. If he hadn't given you the tell, you might not value bet the nines because it's kind of weak. You might worry that he had a king or a 10. But with the tell, you can be sure his hand is weak, and it's worth value betting the nines. This tell is particularly good because it often saves you bets in many ways. You know he's going to call, so you don't bluff. And you know his hand is weak, so you can make better value bets. A final note, and hopefully this is obvious, but if you exhibit this tell yourself, that is, when you got a weak hand, if you go and menace your opponent and try to get him to stop betting, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. If you have a weak hand and plan to call, you should allow your opponent to bluff, because those times you make money. If you tell him, "I have a weak hand and I'm going to call," then you're going to find that when he bets, you're always going to be beaten.